going to present some questions that you really want to pay attention to. How do you navigate the balance between holding strong convictions and practicing intellectual humility in your personal beliefs, be they political, social, or related to areas of knowledge or expertise? The other question that I present to you is that, in your view, how can intellectual humility contribute to more constructive and respectful dialogue, especially in areas where opinions may differ significantly, such as politics or social attitudes? And third, reflecting on personal growth, can you share a specific instance where your practical intellectual humility, admitting you were wrong or revising a strongly held belief, led to a positive impact on your relationships or understanding of a particular subject? These questions I present to you today because these are questions that we're going to answer today on the Network of Awareness, because it's important to have intellectual humility in today's modern society, where there's so many different opinions and theories and views, and also a bunch of narratives that are somewhat true, but more often false in what we gravitate to and believe in. Peace and greetings. Welcome to the Network of Awareness, where we pursue knowledge to expose toxic conditioning, propaganda, and global lies, inspiring you to gain critical thinking for a meaningful reality rooted in universal truths and empowering awareness. Today's installment of the Self-Awareness series, titled From Ego to Empathy, The Art of Embracing Intellectual Humility, we're going to delve deep into the realm of intellectual humility, a virtue that extends far beyond the boundaries of religious beliefs. Intellectual humility encompasses a spectrum of convictions spanning political ideologies, social attitudes, and areas of expertise. It's a journey that involves both internal and external dimensions, challenging us to be aware of our limitations, also to revise our views in the face of evidence when it is presented, and maintain humility in our interpersonal reactions and interactions.
You are now tuned in to the Network of Awareness. To the Network of Awareness. To the Network of Awareness.
Join me as we explore the nuances of intellectual humility, asking thought-provoking questions and seeking answers that can guide us on this enlightening path to meaningful relationships and its profound impact on personal and collective growth. So I first want to start by presenting a particular article that I came across that really inspired this episode. And believe it or not, it was something that was presented on Google. And it was from neurosciencenews.com, which I'll share the link in the episode on the show notes, called Embracing Intellectual Humility. And in the summary, intellectual humility, characterized by an awareness of one's cognitive limitations and openness to revising beliefs, plays a pivotal role in various aspects of human life. This quality encompasses being more open-minded, curious, realistic, and teachable, facilitating progress and personal growth. It fosters tolerance for diverse viewpoints and bolsters relationships by promoting respectful dialogue. Now, these things are very important because this is something that we have to experience every single day, especially if we're people that are working full-time jobs and having to deal with different social attitudes within a professional environment. Now, it goes on to state that, moreover, intellectual humility provides individuals with a more accurate self-perception and the capacity to adapt to change, ultimately leading to a more authentic and enriched existence. And that's how we're going to bring some answers for you today on the Network of Awareness, is to show you how to have a more and authentic, enriched existence. Because that's what it's all about. Is if we can't have that type of experience here, then what's the point of being here in the first place? This article has some key facts that I'm going to go deep into. And it says intellectual humility involves awareness of limitations, openness to new ideas, and the willingness to revise beliefs. Because we live in a world that has a legacy of lies. And many times there's things that we think we know, things that we believe to be true, only to find out if we have enough intellectual humility that we were wrong in believing these things that weren't true, or having these understandings that are not so completely accurate as we thought they were. The second key fact that it brings up is that it improves tolerance towards differing viewpoints and enhances relationships. When you can admit that you're wrong, when you're wrong, you will always have a better chance of having a meaningful, positive relationship, regardless in what aspect that relationship that you have. Doesn't matter. Just having that type of humility is going to help you to grow, especially in a society where when you go from ego to empathy, the ego always wants to be right and will fight to the very death to be right. But when you can check that ego, which we're going to go into, amazing things can happen, and that intellectual humility can work wonders. The third key fact is that humility facilitates personal growth, authenticity, and a more accurate self-view. And that self-awareness intensifies and becomes stronger by having intellectual humility and practicing it at all times. So I'll read some key points in what the author of the article states. I didn't realize it then, but this experience falls under what social science researchers call intellectual humility. And honestly, it is probably a large part of why, as a psychology professor, I'm so interested in studying. Intellectual humility has been gaining more attention, and it seems critically important for our cultural movement when it's more common to defend your position than change your mind. And why is that? I'm here to tell you people the reason why we do this so much is because the ego takes over, and the ego wants to fight for the right to party, to be right. That's what happens with most of us, is that we fight to the very death socially to be right in a particular subject or matter. But when we can look back and understand where we're at fault in the way we perceive things, and our perceptions might not be the reality of what is actually happening, and we can admit to that. And we can admit to things that we don't know that we think we know, especially when it's coming from somebody who's experienced it and does know. And a lot of times, these are the types of challenges that we come across within our social circles and our professional circles as well. Intellectual humility is a particular kind of humility that has to do with beliefs. And see, beliefs should always be evolving within our belief system. The belief system should never be stable, because the truth is usually something that you have to dig deep into the understanding and understand more than what you actually think in order to even gain it. And I'm not talking about your truth. I'm talking about the truth when it comes to life. See, this is not only about religious beliefs as it states. It can show up in your political views. And that's one thing I don't like to talk about is politics, because I'm really not even into politics and I know what it's about. But for somebody who wanted to discuss politics, I would have very limited information, but it would be as accurate as possible. Now, this is like about various social attitudes. This is also about areas of knowledge or expertise of any other strong convictions that you may have. It has both internal and external facing dimensions. Within yourself, intellectual humility involves awareness and ownership of the limitations and the biases in what you know and how you know it, to how it requires a willingness to revise your views in light of strong evidence. Interpersonally, it means keeping your ego in check so that you can present your ideas in a modest and respectful manner. It calls for presenting your beliefs in ways that are not defensive, and admitting when you're wrong. It involves showing that you care more about learning and preserving relationships than about being right or demonstrating intellectual superiority. If you're a narcissist or you know of narcissists, you obviously know that this is a very difficult process for them because they will jeopardize, if not intentionally jeopardize, their relationship so that they can be right as a form of control. But we're talking about people like you and I, people that want to have meaningful relationships in anything that they do and have peace and blessings in their life and not negative hostility and strife. Now let's get into this remedy known as intellectual humility, because I think it's something great. And the purpose of this episode is to help you get from your ego to empathy if you're not doing that already, but to do it at a higher degree as well. And to be aware, right? We have to be aware of our thoughts. Because if we're aware of our thoughts, then we don't have to worry about our actions because our thoughts guide our actions. Now, the first thing I want to present is the internal dimension of intellectual humility. That is awareness and ownership of your limitations. And what does that mean? That means to embark on a path of intellectual humility is to confront the boundaries of your own knowledge and the biases that shape our beliefs. The first step is acknowledging the inherent limitations in our own understanding. How often do we find ourselves clinging stubbornly to our own convictions? And then we become blinded to the possibility that we may have made a mistake or an error. Now, intellectual humility calls for introspection, an honest appraisal of the gaps in our knowledge and an acknowledgement of the influence that molds our perspectives. We have to be aware so that we can be prepared to handle and deal with the relationships that we chose to be in respectfully and honestly. Now, a question that I have is, how can we cultivate a genuine awareness of our cognitive limitations? And what role does humility play in embracing the gaps of our understanding? The simple answer is that by understanding that we don't know everything, admitting to that in conversations that you may not have knowledge in, and if you wind up saying something that is not completely accurate and is presented to you that it wasn't, be able to admit that you're wrong. Be able to admit that your belief is not grounded in some knowing. But I'll even give you a better tip on how to deal with these things. Only talk about what you know. And this willingness to revise your views, it comes from the essence of just having intellectual humility in the first place. And that lies in openness to be able to reassess our convictions in things that we're so deeply rooted in. This is what it is. But sometimes it isn't. And we have to be able to face up and own that. And it's hard. It was hard for me to do that in many instances where I thought something was, but I understand that it isn't. Just for example, I used to believe that God was the purpose of why the Bible was written, the creator, but only to come to find out that the whole entire Bible is not about the creator at all. It's actually about what the Most High, or not, I shouldn't even call the Most High because that was a God, but the creator, the essence of this universe and everything that comes in it into existence is not what that book is talking about. That book is talking about intergalactic beings that basically came here and had wars and misunderstandings and understandings, and human beings were involved in all of it. Once I came to that understanding, I had to break the cognitive dissonance that was holding that conviction so tight, and to be able to have intellectual humility to be like, hey, there's so much that I don't know, but I'm learning. And I'm able to admit that something I thought I knew is not what really is, and be able to understand that I was wrong and in error. And once you get used to doing it on a regular basis, it becomes very simple. It doesn't become hard at all. That goes to say with practice makes perfect. But the essence of intellectual humility lies in the openness and the process of reassessing our convictions. And in the light of robust evidence that's always presented, are we prepared to let go of long-held beliefs when confronted with compelling counter-arguments? Because if we're going to do that, it requires courage, resilience, and a commitment to truth over ego all day, every day. So when we're embracing intellectual humility, that means acknowledging that personal growth, often revisiting at times and revising our views on the world. Another question: what are the psychological barriers that hinder our willingness to revise deeply ingrained beliefs, and how can we overcome them in the pursuit of intellectual growth? That's what leads us to external dimensions of intellectual humility. This is where you got to go deep within, people. And how do you go deep within when strengthening this thing called intellectual humility? Is by keeping your ego in check. I remember I went into the jiu-jitsu dojo, and it was a young guy who owned it. It was in Beacon, New York. And I was thinking about getting into classes. And I remember right at the sign, it says, "Leave your ego at the door." And I thought that was so great because you're coming into a place to learn. And a lot of times we think we know things. We think we have it figured out because our ego wants us to believe that to be true. But so many times we get hindered and we stunt our personal growth because of our egos. But when we can check it, the possibilities are endless. Now, keeping your ego in check, what does that mean? That means interpersonally, intellectual humility demands that we temper our egos when engaging in discussions and debates. And how often do these disagreements escalate into confrontations? Too many. And it's usually driven by a desire to assert dominance rather than seeking understanding. And humility serves as a mediator. It allows us to present our ideas modestly and respectfully, even in the face of opposition. Humility, you've heard me say it before, I'll say it again. It is a superpower, especially in modern day society, when you're dealing with the world. It's not an easy thing to go out into society and deal with the world. I went to a Walmart at 3:00 in the afternoon, that's like blasphemy for me. That's not something I'm supposed to be doing, but I did. And I can tell you, it was quite the experience. Just dealing with different personalities within a 30-minute period. Because I think that's how long I took to be in Walmart. I think I took 30 minutes. And maybe it took a little longer because I was trying to get some wood and I couldn't find none. And I was trying to get this guy to help me. And we went through 5 to 6 or 7 aisles looking for wood that was never going to be found. But just the different experiences, I must have had at least 10 different experiences with 10 different people. Some were just shopping and some that worked there. And I realized that you have to be on your P's and Q's when you're dealing in certain environments because you don't know the psychological or mental state that people are in. And depending on how your discussions go with them, it can be a pleasant experience or it can be a very unpleasant experience. Now, what are the psychological barriers that hinder our willingness to revise deeply ingrained beliefs? And how can we overcome them in the pursuit of our intellectual growth? Keeping our ego in check, people. Keeping our ego in check. In what ways does unchecked ego hinder constructive dialogue? And how can we foster an environment where diverse perspectives are met with genuine curiosity rather than defensiveness? And that's really admitting when we're wrong. And also the first point that I made earlier in this presentation is only talk about what you know. Because if you only talk about what you know, you don't have to worry about somebody correcting you. But If there's something that you think you know and somebody presents something different, admit that you're wrong or be open to looking into that and understanding more about that. I remember I had a conversation on an episode called Deep Healing. I was talking to Dr. G, and Dr. G was talking about how he was healing people from the toxins that were in their body from the science appliance, aka the jibbity jab that they put in your arm. And I had told him that from other doctors and scientists, I found out that even though that's a good thing and you can take out a lot of those toxins, the one thing that they can't do or haven't figured out yet at this point is how to reverse the mRNA from the DNA and switch it back to normal, back into the DNA structure that it originally was in. And unfortunately, they couldn't. Something Dr. G said to me was, wow, I didn't know that. I'm going to have to look into that. It wasn't like he had an answer for that and was like, oh, I can cure that, which he could have said, right? But he didn't. And this is where intellectual humility is so important. This is how you strengthen your relationships, but really strengthen yourself in order to engage with society as a very well knowledgeable and understanding human being that knows when to check their ego and when to have empathy and intellectual humility. Another question I have to present to you people is, why is it challenging for individuals to admit when they are wrong? Because the ego wants to be right. And it's really that simple. You can come up with a bunch of other answers, but at the end of the day, it's always going to stem back to the ego wanting to be right. How can we practice intellectual humility to enhance the quality of our relationships, both personal and professional? And the way we do it is by having humility and admitting when we're wrong and being curious to find out what is right to what we thought was right, but now we know is wrong. It's about being open-minded and being able to have a dialogue that is not so much personal, but more just open to the understanding of learning something new. Hey, fellow seekers of knowledge and wisdom, before we dive back into the exploration of intellectual humility, I wanted to take a quick moment to talk to you about something important, our community on Apple Podcasts. You've been with us on this enlightening journey, and your feedback means the world to us. If you've been enjoying the Network of Awareness podcast, here's a simple way you can support us and help our show thrive in the vast world of the podcast industry. Head over to Apple Podcasts, find the Network of Awareness, and leave us a review and rating. It may seem like a small gesture, but your words and stars have a powerful impact on our visibility and growth in the podcasting industry. Your support fuels our passion for bringing you thought-provoking content, and it lets others know that it is a community worth joining. So take a moment, share your thoughts, and let's continue building this network of awareness together. As a token of gratitude, we'll be featuring some of your most insightful reviews in our upcoming episodes, and we'll give you a shout out because your voice matters and we want to hear from you. So thank you for being a part of the Network of Awareness family. Now let's get back to the exploration of intellectual humility. Stay curious, stay humble, and let the journey continue.
You are now tuned in to the Network of Awareness. To the Network of Awareness. To the Network of Awareness.
Back to the Network of Awareness. And I want to talk about learning and relationship preservation, because you can only preserve the relationship through this intellectual humility and by learning the people that you are having these conversations and dialogues with. Prioritizing learning. See, intellectual humility thrives in an environment where the pursuit of knowledge takes precedence over the need to be right. And how often do we find ourselves engaged in debates solely to assert our intellectual dominance rather than just fostering mutual understanding with the person we're having the dialogue to begin with? We have to embrace Intellectual humility, it involves a shift in our focus, and it goes from winning arguments to nurturing a genuine thirst for knowledge. Now, how do we cultivate this mindset? How do we cultivate the mindset that values learning over winning? And what role does intellectual humility play in creating a culture of continuous growth? When you got people that are willing to learn, when you have a community of people that are willing to learn, that community is going to grow exponentially because everybody's not there to be right. Everybody there is for a collective consciousness of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding to be utilized to make the community better as a whole. And we need this now more than ever, people. We need it. We need it like oxygen these days because we are being socially conditioned to be assholes. We're being socially conditioned to be fully engulfed in the ego where empathy is not even in the back seat. Empathy is tied up in the trunk. And we got to free empathy and put empathy in the driver's seat so that we can get to where we're going peacefully and together. How can we cultivate this mindset, people? By having intellectual humility. And how do we preserve these relationships? Because at the core, intellectual humility is about preserving the relationship, regardless if it be professional or social or family. How many connections have fractured due to the inability to navigate ideological differences with grace and respect? If you remember back in 2016, 17, 18, even 19, I've seen so many different families, and even I've seen it in my own families, where there was such discord and disconnect based on political ideologies, political candidates that were being supported. It was Trump against anything that was Democrat. And Trump's narcissistic personality won over a ton of Americans. And it wasn't just these so-called white people. It was people from all different cultures and ethnicities, all different types. And most of them were the people that gravitated to that narcissistic, pompous, confident, I know what I'm talking about attitude and swagger that Donald Trump had on steroids. I thought it was a little silly, but a lot of people took him seriously. We're in a time right now where intellectual humility, if we embrace it collectively, it can call for a shift in the mindset of the world population. And it can go from prioritizing individual correctness to valuing the strength that diversity of thoughts bring to our relationships and really understanding them for what they are. Another thing to be aware of is in what ways can intellectual humility serve as a bridge in fostering understanding and unity in an increasingly polarized world? And how can it contribute to the preservation of valuable relationships? When we start living an empathetic and having an empathetic mindset and living in that mindset, that's how we come together. We have to, as a society, people, and I'm not just talking about here in the United Shenanigans of America. I'm not even talking about here in the sunshine state of Florida where I reside, but I'm talking about all over the world, within all communities. If we start fostering this belief system and start making it a trend of how to be in this very polarized world, we're going to make a shift. And I believe it's happening. I just don't think it's happening fast enough. I'm just making my contribution as a messenger for the Creator to bring some light to it so that it can inspire and spark people to start behaving it. Because if it's just one person, that's all that makes the difference. But I know it can be far more than that. And it's been a movement. There's been an awakening to this intellectual humility where people are really coming together in similar beliefs that somewhat differ, but are able to understand each other and check their own egos and coming together collectively. With that being said, I want to conclude this episode. I want to present some questions. Some of the questions I want to bring up is, how can we utilize intellectual humility in a polarized world? And how can we go into different dimensions of intellectual humility by discussing the challenges and the rewards of admitting when we're wrong and embracing that, and not having a lot of pride and ego get in the way of understanding things in a different way that we didn't understand before. And just being grateful that we understand it better or have more truth and meaning and understanding and knowing in this life while we're still living it. Intellectual humility emerges as a thread that binds us together, people. Keep that in mind. And keep that on your focus when you're dealing with your next dialogue or discussion, whether it be at work or in some personal social relationship that you have. Also, this is a journey of self-discovery and self-evaluation, marked by an unwavering commitment to knowledge so that we can embrace wisdom and our acceptance of our cognitive limitations, and a genuine respect for the perspectives of others, people. And as we navigate the complexities of our beliefs and engage in dialogue with diverse voices, let us carry the torch of intellectual humility, illuminating the path to growth, understanding, and harmonious coexistence with our fellow brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of intellectual humility, a virtue that transcends the boundaries of ideology and invites us to embrace the beauty of learning, both within ourselves and in our interactions with the world. So take care of yourselves and each other. And when you live in the present, there is always an opportunity for a new beginning. To all my fellow truth seekers and network of Awarians, be present. This is Or the Information signing off. Peace, love, and light, people.